This lesson on academic writing skills is about modal verbs. We will begin with the introduction. Then, we move on to introduce the two main functions of modal verbs. Finally, we will have some quizzes to check out our learning. In the introduction, we'll cover two things. What are modal verbs and why they are important in academic writing? First, modal verbs are the type of auxiliary verb or helping verb to provide more information about another verb. So, why are modal verbs important? Modal verbs can help us in two ways. First, it helps to express possibility or varying degrees of certainty. Second, it helps to make suggestions, that is, to hedge. Avoid being too strong, especially in discussion sections of research papers. Now, let's move on to learn the two main functions of modal verbs and some modal verbs we can use for each function. So, the first type is to express possibility or varying degrees of certainty. The modal verbs are listed in order of degrees of certainty, from the strongest to the weakest. Now, let's look at some examples. First, we can use must to show confident conclusion, which means there's no other possible explanation. As can be seen from the sentences, I must have left it in my flat, or he must have lied to the team members, shows the writer's confident conclusion. Second, will shows a firm prediction while would describes a hypothetical situation. Third, the modal verb should is used for the confident assumption according to a plan. As can be seen from the first sentence, the writer assumes they've arrived because a flight schedule is announced and confirmed. In the second sentence, the project proposal has been completed because the deadline for the project proposal is announced already. The fourth function, may, can express a possibility. As can be seen in both sentences, may indicates a likely or possible explanation. Finally, the modal verbs can, could, or might can be used to express a weaker possibility. For example, we can embrace green sources of energy. The data could have been falsified, or she could or might have been bribed. Let's move on to look at the modal verbs for expressing suggestions. Here are the modal verbs listed in order of strength of device, from obligation to polite suggestion. It's important to notice that these modal verbs could be used both for expressing possibility and making suggestions. First, as we can see from the sentence, must in we must be on time for the conference is used to show an absolute obligation or duty. Second, should in the sentence the development budget should be reduced is used to show a firm advice or obligation. Third, as we can see from the sentence, you can send a letter of appreciation to the company to show your appreciation for the interview opportunity after the job interview. Is used to show opportunity or possibility. And the fourth, could and you could practice grammar by trying the tasks. Is used to propose a suggestion. Finally, as can be seen from the sentence, might and you might want to visit the Toulouse, which is on the site of an ancient Roman settlement and now is the center of aviation and spaceflight. When you go to France on vacation next summer, is used to give a polite suggestion. Now, let's move on to the quiz part to check out learning. First, please identify the appropriate modal verbs. As can be seen from the table, must is used to show confident conclusion when there's no other possible explanation. Will is used to show a firm prediction, while would describes a hypothetical situation. And should shows a confident assumption according to a plan. Finally, may is used to show possibility, while can, could, or might are used to show weaker possibility. Next, please identify the appropriate modal verbs. Here are the answers. As can be seen from the table, must and have to both can be used to show absolute obligation or duty, while should is used to show a firm advice or obligation. Can is used to show opportunity or possibility. And finally, could is used for suggestion, while might is used for the tentative or polite suggestion. Now, let's quickly review what we have learned. As what we've learned, there are two main functions of modal verbs. First, here are the modal verbs used to express possibility or different degrees of certainty. It's important to note that they are listed from the strongest to the weakest. And here are the verbs we can use to make suggestions. They are listed from obligation to suggestion. So, when we write, make sure we choose the appropriate verb to express different degrees of certainty or to make suggestions. Thank you for joining the lesson. The lesson is created by the Academic Writing Module Group at CCU and is funded by the Ministry of Education.